And, you talked about Betsy Palmer, and, of course, the story going around, and anybody who's familiar with Friday the 13th is familiar with this part of it. When you had the fight scenes with Betsy Palmer originally, and this is the story, is that Betsy Palmer didn't know how to, I guess, stage slap, where, you're supposed to not actually hit the person. And if I'm not mistaken, you were taking some real slaps there the first few takes.
Oh, yeah, and they got better and better because, no, she wouldn't hold back, and she said to me, honey, I'm gonna do what I need to do, and I hope you will, counter, because, like I said, she brought our tennis game up. It was either do or die, and I realized I was in the presence of someone who is just absolutely brilliant, and I was blessed in this movie to have someone who had worked with James Dean and Henry Fonda and you name it, had been on, every show that had been around, and every stage for that matter. And she knew her craft, and she still does, God bless her. And she just taught me so much that even though I'd been in the business forever and studied with the best and ... it's not until I hit that pavement with her and just went, okay, now I get it. It's like, you do not hold back, no, because the camera reads every single little speck of hesitation, and you just got to rip it open. And that's why that fight on the beach was so important, because that was just a no-hold-bars, culmination of it all.
So I actually watched the movie again about an hour ago because, I've watched the movie 1,000 times at least at this point in my life. But, I always like to watch a movie before we go on the air when we're going to talk about it. And, I really paid close attention to that fight scene on the beach or on, near the lake. And one of the things I noticed is, no matter how they filmed it, whatever the case may be, it just looked really physically demanding. So, aside from just the slaps and all those things, did you come away with any injuries, or was it just scrapes and bruises, that type of thing?
It's funny, Travis, on my website, because that whole scene, believe it or not, took one full night from the time the sun set till it rose the next morning. And what Sean did was choreograph it like a ballet, and it really... when we were done with it, we both walked away bleeding and bruised and, just full of caked sand in our hair and all over our clothes. And Sean had been taking notes on a steno pad, and that morning I saw him crumple them up along with, the continuity Polaroids, and he tossed them in the garbage can. And I remember grabbing them, sticking them into my jeans pocket, because it was such an incredible night that I still remember vividly, that I figured if the movie didn't get made or wasn't finished and didn't get to the screen, at least I would make a collage of this with the Polaroids and the notes. And I found those notes 25 years later when I moved to Oregon 10 years ago. If you go onto my website, you can actually see them in a poster, and there were 13 of them. And I found them, and I made a poster for Sean and one for me. Can you believe that?
That's impressive right there. You've always been kind of one that remembers where she came from, and I've always admired that about you. A lot of people, I don't think, really care where they came from. It's one of those things where it's like, Dad did that for a while, but now I'm doing this, so who cares about that? But you've always had at least in our minds, I think one of the reasons why you're held so high in people's minds is that you've never forgotten where you came from. You've never forgotten what got you to where you're at now. So, Friday the 13th, it wraps up. You're the survivor girl. And it seemed like, and again, I'm not a production company, I'm not an actor, I'm not a director or any of those things. But, a year later, they're like, we're doing a sequel. So, how quickly were you contacted? How did that come about for you?
The next day, the day after the opening weekend, they were already figuring out what we were going to do for the next one. And you're so right. It's like you have to remember where you came from in order to appreciate where you are, don't you, Travis?
Oh yeah, absolutely. If you don't remember that, then you'll never really progress, I don't think.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And with the second one, I don't know so much that they were remembering where they came from as much as they wanted to make sure they made as big a movie the second time around. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the first one was The Independent, and that was all the passion and the let's get this thing made just so that we can live. And the second one was the studios and the bankers, and they went, all right, we had magic on the first one. How are we going to do that with the second one, So that's always a tough follow-up.
All right, so in your opinion, everybody knows at this point what the fate of Alice is. So were you at your apartment in California? Were you at some random home? Were you close to Crystal Lake? What do you think? If you had to, gun to your head, answer that question, what do you think?
Oh, I have to tell you something. You see, and it's funny, I'm finally going to do this. I'm going to do a YouTube video because Alice is alive and she's well. Now, I'm going to have to prove it because I know my fans are very upset, but I keep on telling that whole thing in part 2 is nightmare within a nightmare within a horrible dream. That's how it goes. First of all, Alice had never worn something so hideous as that green, ugly, pregnant outfit, okay? She was thinner than she was in part 1. I'm sorry, but that's the truth. Then number 2, it's like she wonders how Jason would have found her. Is it through the phone book? Or did he hail a cab? And then, how did he get her from that place to wherever you end up seeing supposedly a robe or something? But I know this for a fact. Alice is in the woods, drinking fine wine and painting beautiful paintings.
The only challenge I have to all that is that there's a character with an ice pick in the head later on in Friday the 13th Part 2 whenever he has the shrine to his mommy.
Yes, it's possible, but don't you think that there's possible, he could have had that made at the same place where he called the cab from?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Anything's possible. So I'm willing to roll with the punches with anything. I've been doing it for well over 30 years at this point.
Travis,
so.
At this time and juncture, it's like I'm so upset when people say, oh, I hated when that happened. It's like, hey, it's the movies. We can change anything we want.
Exactly. It's like a comic book. It's like anything else. You can always retcon it, change it, however you want to do it, as long as you're smart. And, hell, half the time people aren't even smart, and they can still change things. But did you have any qualms about, the character's demise? I know at the time you were going through a lot of personal issues. Was it just one of those things where it was like, I have a strong bond with Friday the 13th, and so I feel like I should do this, but at the same time, I need to distance myself away, because I know you took a lot of time off from, quote-unquote, Hollywood.
Yeah, the thing was, believe it or not, I didn't even live in L.A. Until much, much later. We were all cast out of New York and we were New York actors. So the first one was shot on the Delaware Water Gap, and the second one was shot in Connecticut. And just as you said, Travis, I was going through some nasty stalker stuff, and it was hard to focus, and I had other people handling me at the time that, were, let's just say, no one back then knew about stalking, and I was told it was a better idea not to share the information with anyone, so it was very hush-hush back then, which was crazy. It wasn't until there were stalking laws in 86, because poor Rebecca Schaefer was killed by her stalker, then all of a sudden it came out of the closet, but it was a different world back then, and we didn't have video cameras, It was so strange. So it was kind of buried, and so what I did was I went off to London and studied Shakespeare at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts, accepted me, and I honed my craft over there, and I enjoyed it immensely. Came back to this country, and I screen tested for all my children, and I got the role, and then when I went out to do the role, I had the first anxiety attack I ever had in my life, so I knew I needed to go into, well, not that moment, but my agent and I figured out that voiceovers and looping would be a good bet until whatever was freaking me out mentally I got a handle on.
Yeah, I mean, so, you know, that all happened, but, you know.
No, the whole thing that did happen, which is great, is that I did with a lot of therapy. I got over it, and now I can talk to other people. You know, it's like I always say, Alice had shit early in life. So did Adrienne. I mean, I got rid of all mine. I think everybody goes through such a horrible amount of stuff. Everybody has to survive. We're all survivors, and the key is getting through it and making the best of it and then moving on, which is fortunately what I've been able to do with my family, my support group, my friends, you know, and like I said before, it's my fans. In '04, when I went back and saw the fans that Peter Bracke had told me about at Chiller Theater, that I had no clue I had for 3 solid days. It was nonstop in Jersey. Oh my God, it healed a little part of my heart that I didn't even know needed healing. So I'm blessed, and my fans know that I appreciate them for that.
That's exactly what we've always felt like. You know, anybody who's met you knows exactly what you're like. But, you know, there's something actually, you know, again, in your personal life, but it's, you know, like even noted on IMDb, and I wanted you to maybe shed a little light on. People have talked about the stalker a lot, and, you know, that's obviously horrible, but there was something that involved a plane crash that, you know, I've never heard you talk about publicly. Can you do that right now?
Yeah, I can. Which, you know, it's really bizarre. I know I've mentioned that about the plane crash to a couple of writer friends of mine, but it was always, you know, off the record, because it's not something, and now that it's out there, it's cool and everything, but it's amazing how many things you say off the record that all of a sudden you're reading about. But
right.
Beyond that, so 1980 I had beginning my stalker, so that was that. 1990, January 25th, believe it or not, it's already been 25 years, which blows my mind, and it was at 9:25 p.m. I'm sitting in my bed in Long Island in my house, and my husband is in our apartment in New York City with a meeting, and we were both in the, you know, he was a producer distributor, and I was reading scripts, and all of a sudden I feel the house kind of almost like an earthquake go up and down, kind of shake a little bit. And it was a very strange, it was a cool but not cold January, and it was very foggy, and I looked out, and I couldn't see anything, but I could hear screams. And I called it in. I believe I was the first person who called it in, that I heard maybe an explosion from we all had 5 acres, and McEnroe's family lived across the road from us there, and they had even more than that. And so it was pretty spread out. And so I put on, believe it or not, my Friday the 13th cowboy boots, which I still have to this day, and they probably saved my life that night, because as I was running, the first thing I saw were fuel lines dancing back and forth, and literally skidding almost into all this fuel. And so supposedly it was about 600 yards down the hill from our house. This Bianca plane crashed, supposedly out of fuel, but it wasn't. There's a bunch of aviation laws that were changed, and as a matter of fact, Malcolm Gladwell wrote in his book that followed Tipping Point, I think it was actually yours, a chapter about this, which I was like blown away reading about, because he never called me. I was there. But anyway, it was the trippiest thing I was involved in, and my husband came driving home. He saw it on CNN. And my sister called him and said she couldn't get a hold of me. And so for the rest of the night, we were just involved in our house, which turned into triage, and McEnroe's house was turned into the morgue, and we were turned into, like, helping EMS people, which was really kind of bizarre. And for 2 years thereafter, all the people on the ground had post-traumatic stress therapy, and it was the first time it was also determined that people on the ground, and not just people in the accident, but people who help, can also have post-traumatic stress. So a lot of firsts in that kind of thing, and I remember flashing on, having just seen Born on the 4th of July, and that's the way I was able to get through it. To me, I said, this is a movie set, and, you know, I'm doing makeup. And that's really how I got through it.